Welcome back to 1 Samuel 3:9. Last week we walked through the morphology and translation of this verse, and this week I want to focus in on the accents with you. You're likely starting to see some patterns here, so I hope that you are seeing these patterns with the accents if you've been following these videos. I'll plan to move a little bit more quickly today, I hope, but in order to get started, let's read the Hebrew first and get an overall translation under our belts again. So let's read this together. Vayomer Eli lishmuel, lech shechav, vehaya im yekra elecha, ve'amarta daber Adonai, ki shomea avdecha, vayelech Shemuel, vayishkav bimkomo. So there's our translation, and our reading. Now let's translate the verse. And then Eli said to Samuel, there's our break, and this is what he said now: go, lech, and lie down, both imperatives there. And it shall come about if he calls to you, this he being the voice, so it's a third person call imperfect 3ms, and if he calls to you, then you shall say, speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. The participle there with a durative notion is listening. And so Samuel went, and he laid down in his place. So there's our initial reading and translation. So now that we have that under our belt, let's look for our first major breaks with the accent. So here we have first the athnach, and it falls rather late in the verse, but this is primarily due in this verse to the structure of the direct speech. So now everything before the athnach is what we would call the athnach segment. Now with that segment, we want to look for the near subordinate, which is the tifka here, and then the far subordinate disjunctive accent, which is the zakef katon. Now, because the athnach falls so late in the verse, we have a situation similar to 1 Samuel 3:8, if you remember that, when the athnach segment has several zakef katons as the far subordinate disjunctive accents. Now here is one, and then again, like 1 Samuel 3:8, the other one here is disguised with the segolta. Now, I misspoke in the video on 1 Samuel 3:8 part 2 and called this a revia, so sorry for any confusion there. This is a segolta, but the segolta can substitute for the first zakef in longer segments like this, but it still carries the same weight as the zakef. So now we can add the line breaks at this major disjunctive points, and then I'll reorganize the lines. So here are the breaks, and now let's rearrange the lines for more clarity. So there we go. So now I want to make one more break here, and this one is at the zarka right there. Now this is a relatively light break, but in this case it breaks the introductory element of then Eli said to Samuel from his direct speech, what was actually said, go and lie down. So let's rearrange that. There we go. So I hope you can still see this well enough. The font is starting to get a little small. But we now have the verse broken into the separate clauses and phrases. So let's translate these segments so that you can see how they help separate out the verse segments, how the accents help to separate out these segments. Let's translate this together, and we can go line by line here. And then Eli said to Samuel, break, go, lie down, break. And it shall come about, or it shall be, if he calls to you, break, that you shall say, speak, Lord, break, for your servant is listening, break. And again, the way we have to flip this around in English and jump to the noun first and then the verb makes it a little bit odd, but nonetheless, the break is still at the athnach on avdecha. So now let's add the saluk segment back in, and we'll see the whole verse together. So now in the saluk segment, if you can find the athnach at the bottom there on avdecha, the saluk segment also has a near subordinate, which is the tifka here, and then the far subordinate is the zakef here. This is a pretty standard combination, and hopefully you're starting to see some of these normal patterns. So our saluk segment would translate then as this: and so Samuel went, and he laid down, there's our tifka break, in his place. So that does it for today. Thank you for joining us. And if you have any questions, please let us know. I hope you're starting to see some of those patterns again with the accents. And hopefully you can see that they may not be quite as intimidating as they initially seemed at first. So that's all for today. Until next time, shalom.